worried that cancel culture has started to hurt something that has healed a lot of stuff in the past, which is inclusion. If they were thinking about joining or hiring somebody of another race or another culture, and then they're worried about what they have to say, or worried that they might say something else, maybe they think twice about including them in something that they should include them in.
Cancel culture. Are we for it or are we not? And why?
I think it's tough for an employer who doesn't espouse those feelings, whatever the intent of the person. It's hard for them to stand behind that person and say, hey, we know you made a mistake. I think it's hard. Like growing up in Hawaii, there's a melting pot of cultures. There's just cultures for days. And I grew up going to elementary school, and I'm of Korean descent, but people call me Jack. My peers would call me and all these other Asian slurs, I guess you would call them. I just thought they were being stupid and mean. I never took it as racist, right? You can't be upset more than me if it was an Asian slur, dude. You're not Asian. You can't be upset more than I am. You can be my advocate. You can be my ally. I love you. Thank you. But you're not allowed to be more upset than I am. I think cancel culture circumvents the opportunity that was just placed in front of that ignorant person to educate. And we circumvent that and say, no, I don't want to educate you. Why not reach for education first? Because I think we can all agree we've all said some pretty dumb things in our lives.
Is it about being offended? Is that really what it's about?
I think that there is a time and a place for, I guess, cancel culture. And I think that if the chief of police says something really racist, he should be fired. Period. Yes. I think if the principal of an elementary school or a high school or whatever says something really homophobic, they should be let go of. Maybe you should look at other job opportunities for yourself. Like this is a chance for you to take a step back, and if you have to engage with the public, and I'm a part of that public, and you see me a certain way, and because of that, because I mean, it's not just you thought like you went to Africa and you want to come back and tell me about your trip to Africa. That happens all the time. And I'm just like, okay, great. And where are your people from? I don't know. You don't know. You know we took a boat ride, right? You know this. So don't act shocked that I don't know where my people are from. Like, and so, like, do you know where they're from? It's like this whole, like, I enjoy laughing too. That is not something that I would be like, you need to lose your job about. But, but it depends on who is doing what and why they're doing it and what the cost is to the individual that they're doing it to.
So this is why I love Tamu. Because I thought I knew where I stood on this. She challenged me to rethink. But I first want to respond to my Native American brother over here. I'm Native Hawaiian from Bufalas and Hawaii. When it comes to the cancel culture piece, owners of teams are not going to speak openly and honestly, right? And we just established that there is value in knowing exactly where people stand. We may disagree with them, it may hurt us initially, but there is value in knowing what we're dealing with, right? Right out the gate. Right, and that's really what the cancel culture is. It's accountability, holding people accountable for where they stand, but then we also have to make sure we're integrating the education piece, right? And that starts with creating safe spaces just like this one, where people can expose exactly where they're at. We have to meet them where they're at and then move the needle from there.
Well, I think it's really interesting. I've been like listening to everything, and I feel like pressure going on, and I'm like, oh my god, it's because you guys, cancel culture, the term in itself is very political now, and it's weaponized, and it's like something that's so tricky that we have to go back and we have to look at the beginning of when enslaved people came over here. Our lives were canceled. Our lives were unsafe. we didn't have the same opportunities and privileges. I couldn't wear my hair like this to work or I'd be fired. So now we have professors and, academics that have put together a lot of this work now based on research, which is anti-racism work. And they've done the research and they're bringing in the parts and pieces, and now they kind of have this whole little package that's saying, if we want racism to end, then we can't let it exist even in its smallest form. So it may look like to the outside, well, why are we making a big deal about this? That doesn't matter. That doesn't offend some people. It might offend other people. But even think back 20, 30 years ago with sexual harassment. That if we said, oh, that's okay, that didn't make me feel uncomfortable, that he talked about my body at work, but maybe it felt uncomfortable for someone else, it gets confusing and it gets tricky. And I feel like even like with sexual harassment, we maybe took a hard stance and drew a clear line because we wanted to protect and keep women safe. And that's what we're watching play out right now. We're trying to say, what are the boundaries surrounding this? Is it, if it's okay to say those jokes, or you guys, this is a really lame example, but like with The Bachelor, that played out very publicly. So what does redemption look like? What does learning look like? What does education look like? And that's hard when it's public. It's hard when it's on Twitter. It's hard when it's a celebrity. It's hard when it's a leader. Then you go into companies and businesses and you see companies like Chick-fil-A. We know where the owner stands. Then we see Ben and Jerry's. Oh yeah, we know where they stand. Absolutely. And is that okay? Is that okay? Will certain groups of people just support those businesses? Can they have their own opinions? Where is the line of where it hurts and harms individuals, perpetuating these beliefs and these stereotypes? And are we swinging the pendulum too far this way, hoping to balance somewhere in the middle? So I think it's a really complicated statement, topic, everything.
Well, really, think about who, like, we're talking about cancel culture because of who? Who's getting canceled?
White people.
What was that?
White people?
Absolutely. When, I know black men and women who have lost their jobs for silly things and nobody bats an eye. I know Hispanic men and women who have lost their jobs. Nobody says anything. Well, they were just mediocre. No, actually, some of the mediocre people, that's neither here nor there. Anyway, we're talking about it because it affects white people. And white people can no longer just flippantly say the thing that they want to say.
So, one thing that this might sound weird, that I loved about the cancel culture, especially at the beginning, was it became this great blanket teacher. That's what I loved about the cancel culture, just that one thing, where you could see it on the news, you're like, oh crap, and then everybody else, all of a sudden they go back to school, and they're like, okay, I ain't gonna say that anymore. But like every good thing, it's always twisted around and flawed and messed up, and so, innocent people get caught in that, there are many people I'm like, oh, you gotta uncancel that person.
I really appreciate what you just said. And I remember in a class one time, something was said to me, if things were allowed to play out, if you will, in the racial tensions within the country and the post-slavery era and so on like that, the hearts of particular kinds of white people would have been changed, and then it would have been genuine, and it would have been, harmonious because it would have been real. But if there were not any government, or somebody said, we're going to fight for whatever reason they fought, where would we be? Would we still be trying to work it out until we get enlightened? Somebody said, this got to stop. And so I say, if the counterculture or cancel culture, if it's going to wake up some people with a slap across the face real quick, oh, glory, hallelujah, praise the Lord. Amen. Now, for those who can get it in another way because we're loving and we can sit down and talk one-on-one, hey, good for them too. I just, I try to stay away from the judgment thing and say, Lord, you're in charge. help me do the right thing. But I'm so glad that there's not slavery as we wait till all the people, subject, and power come around.
Like, how many of us who are white sit around with our white friends and talk about race?
Can I just say something to that?
We should.
I think here's the thing. Black people, I guess I'll just speak for culturally, me coming up, you're raised by people who are older than you telling you, now when you go out there, be this kind of black person, not this. You gotta be like this when you're out there because you're black. Now you wanna be like this because they see you like that, right? And so I thought that all races and all cultures did that to their children. And so here we are in 2020, and I'm watching white people be so taken back to be corrected. I'm like, didn't your parent tell you not to be like how you racist people were in the past and don't be that kind of white person because look at the history? Like, I figured they weren't hearing that, but I'm like, this is your first time being corrected as your race? And so I think that's a big part of the pushback, and so I can have empathy for that because it's new, but that was kind of surprising to me.
With every question you had, the thought came that what's happening today has to keep happening. And a lot of people in this space are doing this in other places, in other platforms, in other ways. But from a mental health standpoint and from an education standpoint, that's the work that I do. I think collectively we're all one headline away from a nervous breakdown. And I say that in all seriousness, the men in this room are the most at risk because I think culturally speaking on a different level, men aren't given permission to do what I've seen today, which is emote and say, I'm not doing okay.
To kind of get back to the whole pandemic thing and the things that I've learned and this whole conversation, it gave me a lot of perspective. It gave me perspective that I've been really lucky that I could work from home. It gave me a lot of perspective that where I used to live in New York City and Brooklyn and Queens, that there are families that can't feed their children because they depended on the school system to do that. And now they have to find the money for the meals that they were already providing. Plus, it gave me perspective that this pandemic, as stupidly as Madonna said, is not an equalizer. It brought to the surface everyone's inequity and everyone's insecurity, and it brought to the surface too many things that we're all trying to fight, but more importantly, it brought to the surface how we're all trying to fight it differently. We're all trying to be right instead of finding the right answer.
You see the improvement globally, but individually, maybe you don't always see it. I have to try and remain positive for my kids, and for me, for my mental health, right? I talked to an uncle in Nigeria, and I remember he said to me, "Are you wearing your mask? Go and get your mask." I was like, "Okay, yes sir." I had to show it to him like this. He said, "Good." He said, "Do you know why you're supposed to wear your mask?" I said, "Because of COVID." He said, "Yes, but there's another reason." I said, "We have 1 mouth and 2 ears." And then he says to me, "And we are told that we need to cover our mouth like this." He said, "God is trying to tell us something. To shut up and listen."